Steinman, and in that show, they got me my first. They got me into the union. They got me into the union, and then Steve Schwartz was able to bring me to town when he started the Magic Show on 48th Street.
All right,
And
so
I
now
played
you-
on Broadway. I playing like for a year on Broadway. That's when I first moved to New York. And Gilda moved down at the same time to do a show, like another National Lampoon show, sketches similar to and Belushi would put it together for them. So those two worked together for the first time in that. And Bill Murray was in it too, as was Harold Ramis, who's now the director of, an awful lot of things, including those Analyze This movies, and many.
And obviously, you're still maintaining at this point in the story relationships with these people, seeing their shows, hanging out.
I'm just getting to know them. I remember very clearly a party that Gilda had on the Upper West Side during the time when they were putting together that National Lampoon show, and they were all trying out sketches and trying out material. Belushi was there, as was Billy, and Richard Belzer was a stand-up comic, and he said, "I gotta go and do a set at Catch a Rising Star. I'll be right back." And he did. He left and he did a set and he came back. And I said to myself, am I ever lucky? I'm in New York and I know a guy who's so hip that he leaves the party, does a set of stand-up comedy, then comes back and tells us the stuff that he did on stage. Well, that was something. They did that. That show was pretty great. And then Howard Shore had been in a show in Toronto just before I left town. I was doing these theatrical things, and I did. Sure enough, I did have to leave this show in the middle to come to New York when Stephen Schwartz said the Magic Show is gearing up. I had to leave this sort of real experimental show. But in the band of this crazy experimental show was Howard Shore on woodwinds, and Howard and Lorne Michaels were fast friends and guys who used to put on camp shows together and forged a show business friendship that is strong even today in what was probably a Jewish camp somewhere in, the, God knows where it was, in Canada. Howard, this would have been in 74 or 5. I can never get that date right, which year it was, but Howard called. I'm coming down to do, Lorne, my friend, is doing Saturday Night Live, a new show, new concept, live band. What do you say? And I said, I can't sight read. I don't know if I can do a weekly show. It's one thing to learn the score of a Broadway show and be able to get it up to speed and play it every night, but this is going to be different. He said, don't worry, you'll have enough time. Trust me, you'll have enough time to learn anything. And so that's how I got that job. But it was sort of perfect for me because I was friendly with so many of the performers already. And so I was a natural to develop, to rehearse with them musical material and start developing special musical material.
So now, what was your role in the band? At least, what was it designed to be?
Well, things were just developing, Howard brought me on as key guy. I would be his key guy, his keyboard player. I would also rehearse with the writers and performers. And in those days, we used to go. I don't know why we had the whole 30 Rock at our disposal, really. But on Wednesdays, we would go to NOLA rehearsal studio and spent an afternoon there kicking around ideas in the style of the experimental theater that were really everybody's roots. Experimental theater and Second City type sketch theater. Even the set of Saturday Night Live, as you know, was designed originally by Eugene Lee and Franny Lee, and they, right at that time, they had done a successful show running at the Broadway Theater just over here, where you have performance areas scattered among audience, right in the middle of audience. And that's kind of the way they designed the Saturday Night Live to look too. This was, I can't remember the show that they did, but maybe it'll come to me. Very much a live theater type of concept that Lorne had for Saturday Night Live. And so we had a Wednesday, like a trust exercise type of Second City-esque Wednesday afternoon at NOLA to develop material, try things, jam session things. And some of these things made it to the air in a very rough form. Lorne did like, maybe it was a nod to his past at the CBC, but I remember a couple of things we did in the early days of Saturday Night Live where I was playing the piano and the cast was kind of sitting along, like in a Dinah Shore type of configuration, along the side of the piano, and everybody was just kind of doing bits right at the piano. Belushi did a little Ray Charles.
Oh, I remember that.
Which was impressive. Wow, he could do Ray Charles. It was pretty good. And then they would do it in the bee costumes. Just as because the bee thing was a running gag that no one really got. But Lorne loved it, and Belushi hated it. That's all I know. But sometimes the bees would be lined up Dinah Shore-esque and be kicking around jam session ideas. So then I did a number. Marilyn Miller was who is a friend of mine to this day, and a writer from about the sixth show on. She joined the writing staff, and she was interested in doing musical type of numbers that could take place on a show like this. And she did a number that I helped her with. She wrote it all herself, really. The number was, premise of it was Shirley Temple Black is a negotiator, intra-nation negotiator, trying to negotiate a peace treaty. And the only way she can do it is by becoming her old self of Shirley Temple and going into a number. And Marilyn was so thrilled with the way the number came out that she spoke to Lorne about getting me a credit on the show. And I started to receive a credit towards the end, either end of the first season or in the beginning of the second season, something like that. And the nature of the credit was interesting. It was contentious. We were very conscious of not wanting to do an old-fashioned type of variety show. We, of course, were too hip for that. We were going to do a new type of show, new comedy, edgier, and not in any way reminiscent of the old type of variety shows of the days of Carol Burnett, because we perceived that as being corny. And in fact, we used to have And we love Carol Burnett, don't get me wrong, and I've met her, and she is not only such a nice person, but so, we revered her, really, but also we didn't want to be, in our parlance, too Carol Burnett.
You wanted to break with the past.
Yeah, but when it came to my credit, although what I was doing was writing special musical material, that, to us, rang as being too Carol Burnett. So we wanted to stay away from that credit. And I would be sitting around with, I remember Gilda and Lauren and Marilyn and me. What should my credit be? We don't want to be too Carol Burnett. And I was, of course, fascinated with, parodying the older style of show business, the way Billy Murray did in his lounge singer character. And we used to, all of us or at that time would get a laugh out of a type of, you've been listening to the musical stylings of, we thought that was such a funny phrase. And then it even went to, next generation was the comedy stylings of. Well, musical stylings is what I decided to use as my credit, musical stylings. I thought that was hilarious. Until my mother called and said, it sounds like you're doing their hair. So I went back to special musical material after that. And then the job description kind of started to begin changing, and I was responsible now for special musical material, be it original, sometimes we would write an original song, or just doing a number of whatever, using an old song and putting together a number, or playing, accompanying Elliot Gould or something at his monologue mark at the top of the show. And then eventually I started getting paid for doing it. Not too long after that, I started getting paid for doing it. But originally I was just, functioning as a rehearsal pianist and developing music under that job description. Yeah.
You talk about not wanting to be too Carol Burnett.
Yeah.
So that kind of speaks to at least a consciousness or an awareness that you all were doing something that was, for the time, pretty original, pretty groundbreaking, pretty hip. Talk about just kind of within that group, the writers, the band, the cast, Lauren, all of those people, kind of what that energy was like certainly those first couple of years.
Well, the main thing was that it was a lot of work, a lot of hours, and everyone was very busy, and which conveniently nobody really had much of a personal life anyway. So we had nothing else to do but just be in that building all the time. And then adjusting, gradually to Lauren's original concept of the day parts and clocks. His day starts 2-3 p.m., and ends in the wee hours. And he eventually worked the production schedule of the show into those hours, so that the show started being written late into the night, Tuesday night. That's really just because that's when he, like a vampire, he comes alive and creates comedy at those hours. So it was a lot of time and very exciting and a lot of fun. And again, a lot of people's first job in television. So they're just thrilled to get to do this stuff, be in a real television studio. Anybody who, even me, special musical material, but if I created or helped develop a number, like I'm thinking about Jill Clayburgh singing Sea Cruise. I don't know why, but she was the hostess of the show. And Michael O'Donoghue had this idea that you put her in kind of a saucy naval outfit with a shirt tied here. Oh. If we had to stop for every siren,
It's New York. It's real New York ambiance. So
That's
tell me
right. It's
about-
so put Jill Clayburgh in a naval, a cute naval outfit, and put her in front of a huge Marine Academy choir or Naval Academy choir. I can't remember. I'm sorry. And have her sing "Sea Cruise" by Frankie Ford from the New Orleans rock and roll era. Excuse me, of the '60s, and I got to collaborate on not only on the arrangement of the tune, but on the production of it as well. Because that's the way Lorne worked. If you wrote a piece, you produced it too. All the details, the costumes, everything, and I was right in that group of people doing this stuff for the very first time. So
like
of course,
all the musical material then being developed. Like I remember early in the first season that the girl group piece that Jane, Lorraine, and Gilda did, Chevy's Girls. Was that like something that you had worked on as well?
absolutely, and of course, you know my main musical rock and roll orientation is girl group music. That's my thing. And so it was Chevy was the first guy to take off as a celebrity and star out of Saturday Night Live, and there was a photo play or something, old-fashioned type of television magazine, and it had him on the cover, and then it had the three girls, Gilda, Lorraine, and Jane, in the top, and it said Chevy's Girls, and it really appealed to me as a song title. And Marilyn too. I believe she and I wrote that together. In the style of a Phil Spector girl group thing. Yeah, she wrote. Yeah, she mostly her ideas. I love when you fall down, but I wish you were falling for me. And of course, and it went into a middle section which was like leader of the pack. Somehow there was a car accident in the middle of Chevy's Girls.
I remember
Oh no, you know why? Because Chevy, famous as he was for taking a fall, remember how he used to fall down at the beginning of every show?
Yeah.
And then come up and say live from New York at Saturday night. Well, and then he started doing Gerald Ford, the clumsy president, and he would combine that with the fall thing, and now he was falling as Gerald Ford. Well, he was at a podium speaking as Gerald Ford, and then just keeled forward slowly, and pow, the thing went right down. But it wasn't padded the way it was supposed to be, and so it was just bang, bored against that concrete floor. And he went right to the hospital and missed a couple of shows because he was injured from doing that fall. So this was a show that he wasn't on, and we were all so worried about him, that this song really did come out of a concern for him and a love for him. It definitely had a feeling of concern for Chevy in the hospital, and that he would be seeing this in the hospital, watching the show live in the
I
hospital.
don't think I knew that. So that whole leader of the pack middle part then really had.
It was, I guess, the accident, yeah, something like that. And it was just, Marilyn did some research on. Marilyn's background was the traditional Broadway musical too, but Marilyn thoroughly researched my oeuvre of the girl group and found the Shangri-Las and said, we'll get an car accident in.
Great. Talk about some of the other pieces that you worked on. Like, for example, like famously, Belushi doing Joe Cocker, which I know is something that he'd started with National Lampoon and Lemmings. But like, I know he did it a couple of times on the show, including with Cocker at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you worked on?
I didn't because he did. Oh, I did help my friends with him. I guess that was the first time he did Cocker, and it didn't require much, but more than playing the organ, that great organ part, with the help of my friends. But I will say that when early in those days of Brian Doyle Murray introducing me around to people like Belushi and O'Donoghue, when I first moved to New York and was working at the Public Theater, Belushi said immediately, he was doing Cocker in the Lemmings, which was a National Lampoon production of a live theatrical show that played in the Village. First half of it being Second City style, second half of it an all-out musical parody of Woodstock. And the people in it were Belushi and Chris Guest and Chevy and others that I'm forgetting. But they would take it on the road, and Belushi said, come out with me. He just met me. He said, come out and I'm doing Cocker in the Lemmings and somewhere in New Jersey, and I need a piano player. You know, the piano player's sick. Just do the one song. And you're Leon Russell. And I got so scared, you know. I could have done it and learned it, but just the fact, how do I get to New Jersey? You know, all of these things worried me. I said, I can't do Leon Russell. He says, you come out, you wear one of those hats, you put your finger up in the air, you're Leon Russell. You learn the thing. And somehow I turned him down, but so I didn't. I would have played Cocker with them that night. They had an original song, Only at the Bottom of the Barrel, from that show that he used to sing. But anyway, so I did help my friends, and then he worked with Cocker and Cocker's band when he came on and did Feeling All Right, and there were two dueling Cockers. So no, I didn't. You know, I just got to observe that, but of course it was uncanny.
Who were some of the musical guests that you did get to work with that were particularly memorable for you? And any great anecdotes working with any of the, you know, amazing array of musical guests that came through SNL at that time?
Because of the size of the studio, there was so much room that most of the guests got to bring their own organization, and the band didn't play with too many people. But one of the early ones that we played with was John Sebastian of the Lovin' Spoonful, and he had a hit. This was the 70s. The theme song of Welcome Back, Kotter was a hit. And he was going to sing it on Saturday Night Live with our band. And this was live television, and it had that intro, bum, 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 and it repeats, bum, 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 and he comes up to the mic to sing, and it feeds back, whoosh, whoosh. A big loud squeal comes out of it, startles him, and he backs up, keeps playing the guitar, but doesn't sing. And now the music is going, and he's not singing, and nobody knew what to do, because it was live, and he wasn't singing. And I remember clearly Lorne coming over to the stage. What is going on? You know, he's not singing. Start it again. Oh, I thought, oh, what a good idea, and we started it again. And this was all, you know, absolutely live on the air. It probably didn't take much more time or less time than it just told me to tell it, but at the time it felt like time stood still.
Wow.
Because it was live.
Any other things that you can remember because it was a live show that were like that, where just in the moment you kind of had to just go with it?
That's the main thing that I remember that was out of the ordinary. The thing one must remember about Saturday Night Live is as groundbreaking, you know, as it is, and as edgy as it is, and totally unlike anything else. It was totally blocked and rehearsed, and you didn't vary from the script too much. As I read some of these books about Saturday Night Live, I was reading about somebody who insisted on changing the script and improvising, and it just wasn't done. It may have been Damon Wayans.
It was Damon, yeah.
And he ended up, at least by mutual agreement, leaving the show because it wasn't done.
Well, one great musical moment from SNL, or at least great in my recollection, that although I know you didn't participate, if I could get your perspective just from having been there, when Elvis Costello switched songs.
Yeah.
Can you tell that story?
Yeah. It was to me better as a told story than when I was really there. I was paying very close attention to all the musical acts, even those that I wasn't working with, because I was just fascinated and I wanted to learn as much as possible and I wanted to observe as much as possible. So I was watching very closely as they played their first song, Elvis Costello and the Attractions, and then stopped in the middle, and he went, "Stop." And he said something like, "Ladies and gentlemen, there's no reason that we should be playing this particular song at this particular time." And then he said, "Radio, radio," and counted 1, 2, 3, 4, and went into a very fast punk tempo song called Radio, Radio, which I've since been given to understand is about the media, and it is his comment on the media. But to tell you the truth, certainly in the studio, maybe on television you could hear clearer, but you couldn't tell one song from the next being there in the studio. One that was just as fast as the next, with lyrics that were just as unintelligible. And he is actually one of my favorite singers, and now has shown such longevity and also such versatility. But at this time, he was a stone cold punk anarchist from the UK. That's my recollection of that. And I remember another one too. Patti Smith, her first appearance. And I was right into her and watching her perform, and she decides to do My Generation by The Who. And I could see that something was up with this. And I said to her, because I had a hunch about it, I said, "Patty, when The Who used to do this number, they would destroy their instruments at the end." And she like that. And sure enough, on the live show, she and her band destroyed their instruments, but they were afraid to indicate that they were going to do that. They thought they wouldn't be allowed to do it. It was the early days of live rock and roll. But as a result, the director didn't know what, missed a lot of the action as they break up thing. He doesn't know what to shoot. Maybe shooting around it. Whereas maybe she should have said, we're going to do a thing like The Who where we smash our instruments. But no, you can understand where she would want to save it for the air. I remember another one. One thing's leading to the next, but there was a funny trick played by Michael O'Donoghue on the band ABBA, who since then have become one of the biggest pop sensations and money-making sensations, thanks perhaps to Mamma Mia and the additional life that it's given their catalog and all the many, many hits that they had since then. But at this time, they only had 2 songs. They were just starting out in the 70s, and they had one called SOS. And Michael O'Donoghue said, "Gee, it would be funny to have ABBA on, and you put them on the deck of the Titanic, and you have them sing SOS, and as they're singing, the Titanic sinks, and we don't tell them." And that's how it went down. They weren't told.
ABBA didn't know that would be the circumstance.
Didn't know, and it wasn't done at the dress rehearsal. It was saved, but they had things like furniture on pulleys so that it would be they'd tilt the camera, and it looked like the Titanic was going like that, and then a pulley, chairs and tables are going across, and they didn't tell them until the air show, and they kept on playing, and they were not playing live. They were singing live to a track. Okay. So the track continued, and because they didn't bring a band for some reason, it was a good thing they didn't bring a band, because the thing might have fallen apart. But the music kept on going, and they kept on singing it like the pros that they are.
Now, you made allusion earlier to the lounge singer piece that Bill Murray had been developing, and I guess you and he had developed that prior to SNL?
No. I mentioned that Brian, his older brother, told me that he was doing this hilarious character as a part of an Alan and Rossi type of team in a sketch
Right.
at SCTV. And it sounded hilarious to me. Bill and I met pre-Saturday Night Live. Oh, maybe so, but not really. The one antecedent of this bit that I can remember is, it wasn't even Bill. It was Brian and Belushi. That's a sketch from the National Lampoon Radio Hour. So it wasn't that. We hit it off right away, and Bill was not on Saturday Night Live yet, but he was a member of the group of friends. And I think that I was in California. I left the Saturday Night Live in the second season and did a little sitcom work for Norman Lear and Don Kirshner. And I think that I remember watching. He joined the show while I was away from the show. And I was watching from the West Coast and saw him do a thing where he's in the shower and he takes the soap microphone made out of soap and starts doing a show in the shower and brings in a special guest, his wife, into the shower, and then brings in a guy who she's been having an affair with. All takes place in the shower. And I was told that that was the first time he really scored on Saturday Night Live, was that with that shower thing. So there, I think, was the genesis that I can remember of that bit. And then where it came from, I don't know. I guess out of his mind, I could do a lounge singer. And the first one may have been Nick Winters at a ski resort, a guy working at a ski lodge and entertaining in the après-ski lounge. And everybody's wearing après-ski outfits. That was the idea of it. And the guy tailors his material to fit the ski lounge. And says, that's the way, 6 inches of powder. I like it with a 30-inch base. That's the way. That was one of the things he did on that. And I was in the sketch accompanying him, and I always had one. And then he went on to do the sketches after doing Nick Winters. Then he was at a summer resort as Nick Summers, and then as Nick Springs in summer, and then he was on a train car as Nick Rails, and it was always be thematic about a train, train kept a rolling, whatever. The song choices always came right out of Billy's head. That's the way we figured out what songs he would do, whatever he says, because he always had the craziest, funniest ideas on how to do these songs, mostly pop tunes, oldies or contemporary tunes, but done in a lounge style. And I was just, the perfect guy to do these type of hybrid styles with him.
So how did you guys collaborate? Did you help write some of the special lyrics, or were you just doing the arrangements to kind of?
I was asked to be part of the writing of the whole sketch. With a large group of people, it was the same every time. Tom Davis, Tom and Bill, I think, may have, well, I know this from reading Tom's book recently, we will all have books. Andy Warhol was only half right. We'll all have books for 15 minutes. Tom Davis has a great book, though, and he says that he and Billy kind of went to bars and worked out some ideas for this type of thing. And then Tom and Billy and me and Dan Aykroyd and Marilyn Miller in a room would write the whole thing, start to finish, with Billy's ideas for songs. It starts with an opening number. We come up on him, and he's singing already. One week, he wanted to work with an early drum machine, which is, like a computer that plays a beat. In these early days, just a Latin band would have it playing a bossa nova. Now records are made with those things. No more real drummers, but that's another story. He wanted to work with an early drum machine and use it as if it was his band. I thought it was a terrifically creative idea, and we rented him a drum machine and kept it. it was like $100 a day. You know, he kept this drum machine so he could work with it at home and learn how to work it and stuff. And he worked out a thing where, like, the drum machine takes a solo and stuff. He turns up the tempo. It just goes into a big, and he says, you know, the Roland AC-30 drum machine, ladies and gentlemen. That was one of the beats in the thing. So we would just put the sketch together that way. And one particularly Canadian beat that always took place was that Danny grew up in Canada too, and we would come from areas that were ski areas, and the ski areas were often run by native Canadian people, because sometimes the ski areas would be on their land, on their reservation land and stuff. They had this whole thing going on with the natives and Canada. So they were always, in my recollection, and Danny's too, it seems like these guys who were running the chairlift always would find a big old possum caught in the chairlift. They always seemed to be... So Danny would always enter the lounge as a Chief Jimmy Joe Red Sky working out on the chairlift, and he brings in a beaver. That was always a part. So sometimes he would just come in and write that part of it with us, Danny. Then he'd go up, write another sketch that he's working on with Belushi down the hall, stuff like that.
Let's just talk a little bit about a few of the cast members, just your experience of them as people as well as pros that you were working with. You've touched on all of them a little bit, but let's just go through the list of names. Just first things that come into your head. Dan Aykroyd.
Wonderful, loyal friend. Incredibly creative mind. Original, totally original. Brought characterizations into Saturday Night Live. Technically oriented thing. I mean, has a obsession with things like the Avro Arrow, half plane, half spaceship that was developed in Canada, and he has a lot of technical information, and he could use these things in characters and come up with things like that Bass-O-Matic Bass 3000. His mind works in funny ways. And he is a great musical performer too. We have a lot of fun doing music things together over the years, and still work together. When he might open up a blues bar, that based on the characters that he and Belushi created.
You know what? Let's actually use that as a point of entry. Talk about the development of the Blues Brothers and your role as they started to take that concept and grow it. And obviously leading to that first album, which you were a part of, Briefcase Full of Blues.
They were both great music fans and both sometime musical performers. Danny in Canada, performing in blues bands, learning how to play blues harp. A great fan of soul music and blues, and with a lot of knowledge of authentic Chicago and Delta blues. Belushi, former drummer in a rock band in Wheaton, Illinois, and a fan of all kinds of rock and roll, certainly the Stones, Allman Brothers. And he and Danny became fast friends. Danny showed him a lot of stuff, talked to him a lot of stuff about their favorite musics, what stuff they had in common. And that was a common ground they had, soul music and blues. Belushi got more into it when he was making Animal House, and he was in wherever they shot that, Washington State or something, or Oregon.
I think it was Eugene, Oregon.
Yeah. And he met a guy, Curtis Salgado, was a front man, who was fronting a band with Robert Cray, the blues guitar player, playing harmonica and singing and hanging with Belushi late into the night and playing records for him and stuff and giving him a little course in the blues. And then these two guys started fantasizing about having an act, and Lorne allowed them to perform a song during the warm-up for Saturday Night Live, during that last 10 minutes before the show goes on live at 11:30, maybe at 11:20. Come on in front of the house band, Howard Shore's house band, with me in the band, and do a blues number. And it was an instant success and sensation in the warm-up for the live audience, because it was so high energy and up-tempo, and it had already the look. Belushi knew that look from the piano player who I met too from Chicago, Second City, Fred Kaz, K-A-Z was his name, a beatnik who told Belushi about these beat junkies that he would carouse with, who, in order to cover up the fact that they were addicts, they would dress very conservatively, but always the same: black suit, white shirt, black tie, and shades to cover up their eyes. And so that's where that look came from. And the thing had high energy and was just perfect for starting off the show before, get the crowd energy up before we go on the air live. And then when Lorne was pushing that bee thing, the running character of the bees that nobody understood, and Belushi hated the bees, hated having to put that outfit on. But one of them had the idea of, well, maybe Belushi would do it as if they got to sing a blues song, I'm a king bee, dressed as the bees. And that was the first time they did it on the air. Bees with shades, Danny on harp, John singing I'm a king bee, and of course he does it very athletic, even though he was sort of weighty, but he could do a complete backflip and twist over once and land, pow, right flat on his back. And you'd think, but he would do his cocker too sometimes. You'd think he must be dead down there. But he'd get up and to sing another chorus. He did that in that thing, and they got a record deal.
And then you got to, what did you have any role in helping to put that band together?
Yes, I did. They came to me and hired me as their musical director. I understand that first they used to go around and do the act in front of their various bands in clubs around town, like the Lone Star was a great club for country and rock live gigs, and they might have considered some self-contained bands that they worked with at some of these spontaneous club things, but eventually it came to me to do it. I certainly, I went back pretty far with both of them, and I was absolutely thrilled to do it. And we set about putting together a band one at a time, casting it, and I had the notion that it was going to be something that was important, and also I had the knowledge that they were so hot from being on Saturday Night Live that we could have had anybody. We had our pick of anybody we wanted for this band. And so we, one by one, I and Belushi, Danny kind of stayed out of it. Danny just, he gave it up for John, as he did in so many cases, because he loved John so much. Danny was the kind of the brains behind it, but he gave it up to John, the soul of the thing. And John and I put it together and started with Steve Jordan, the drummer who was playing in the Saturday Night Live house band at the time, and I knew pretty well from doing sessions with. Very hot drummer who has become quite a successful record producer of late. Hired him first. John got very antsy about who are we going to have on lead guitar. And as I put it in my book, which, if I may plug it again, it's on Doubleday, comes out on October 13th. John thought of himself as Mick. He needed a Keith. Who's going to be the guitar player? And there was a great guitar player who came in. John knew from his rock and roll connections, those connections being established at late hours, in various nightclubs anywhere from between Los Angeles and here, a great studio player named Mike Landau who came in to jam with us this one week. I kind of set aside 1 week to get tunes together and get the band. Well, it must have been more than one. Yeah, hire the band and get tunes together. Unfortunately, Animal House came out that very week. So John was exploding right before my eyes, and it was hard to get his attention that week. Kudos were coming in from all over the world, Nonetheless, we had a jam session with this guy, Mike Landau, who, although he was a great guitar player, I just thought we could get somebody really authentic for this blues band. And I still thought it was, as we all did, thought it was going to be really pure type of Chicago blues, three-chord blues. And I said, don't hire this guy, we could find somebody better. And Belushi started to get really uptight. Well, who are we going to, we got to hire somebody right away. He said, we got to go see Doc Pomus. What? And Doc Pomus was a guy I knew who he was. I knew him, actually. He was a well-known songwriter from the 60s, wrote Save the Last Dance for Me, among other things. But he was a guy who trolled in nightclubs and was in touch with talent, and was a very funky guy in general. We tracked him down at an open mic night, and explained our problem, and he said, Matt Guitar Murphy is your man. And I hadn't heard of Matt Guitar Murphy, although he's got quite a set of blues credentials, having played with a lot of the greats of the Chicago blues scene. But I just said, he's the real deal, and Palmer said, yeah, so I said, okay. And they hired him that night. John hired him that night. And then I said, but we need a rhythm guitar player too. Because I just knew that the authentic blues guys like Matt, like Doc said Matt was, often they don't play rhythm guitar. Okay, I had that. And then Tom Malone, who is a horn player who works with me still on Letterman. And we had hired Tom and Lou Marini from the Saturday Night Live band, and Tom said these two guys, Steve Cropper and Doc Dunn, who I knew very well as having been in the original Stax rhythm section and the group that recorded under the name Booker T and the MGs, but besides that played for Otis Redding and Sam and Dave and all our favorite soul performers. He said, I'm in a band with them and they're available, and so we hired the two of them. And then we added Alan Rubin on the trumpet. He was on the Saturday Night Live band as well, and Bernie Brillstein got him his job, talked me into hiring him too, and I said, why not? He's great, and why should we only have two horns? Let's have three. And we added Tom Scott when we got to LA because Malone stayed behind while his wife had a baby. And that, I think, is, one by one how we put together the band. And when Danny wrote the script of the Blues Brothers movie, he sort of took off on that idea of putting the band together one player by one in each
So it mirrored
scene.
your actual process.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow. I know we could spend a lot more time on the Blues Brothers, but we should probably wrap out some of the SNL stuff and move forward. But if I may, can I continue with the cast? Talked about Dan. I think we've talked about Belushi as well. Let's get a few others. Garrett Morris, someone else who had a musical background as well.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts there?
Great guy. We became friends. He was originally hired as a writer, I think, and wasn't going to be a performer. So I don't know why he became a performer, but he became a performer before the first show. And we did a number of musical things together. He was a good performer, and he would go for it. Mr. Mike and Tina Turner thing, which was Brian Doyle Murray's idea, comes to mind. O'Donoghue had a character, he called himself Mr. Mike, and he would tell what he referred to as least loved bedtime tables, and he was just a creepy guy who appeared in a kind of a half, lit thing. and since it sounded like Ike and Tina Turner, how about Mike and Tina, Mr. Mike and Tina Turner? And Mike, sitting there and half lit with a guitar on his lap, tells one of his creepy tales, nice and slow, and then the band kicks in, and Garrett, in drag as Tina, does it nice and rough, and he tore the house down in 4-inch heels as Tina Turner. And it was the first time I got to do Don Kirshner.
Can we get a little of your Don Kirshner?
Yes, I'll do it in the context of this. Kirshner was, and is, a very well-known guy who, besides being a publisher in the early 60s of all the great Carole King and Neil Sedaka stuff, which was my favorite era, and the girl group stuff, you know, Locomotion. At this time in the 70s, he had a live in-concert rock show, Don Kirshner's Rock Concert. Now, I mentioned that I took a second year off of Saturday Night Live. I was in Hollywood doing this show called A Year at the Top, produced by Kirshner and Norman Lear. And that's another whole act, you know, another 3 spools of tape we don't have. But it only ran for 5 episodes on CBS in the summer of '77. We were rock stars that sold our souls to the devil, me and Greg Evigan. Anyway, while working on it, Kirshner calls me up and says, I'm going on my show, Don Kirshner's Rock Concert. Instead of just voiceovers by an announcer introducing, now the Edgar Winter Group, I'm going to go on camera and do it. He says, I might be stiff, but Sullivan was stiff. He had the gig. And he had the gig, you know, he had the gig. Cat had the gig. And Kirshner was a very fast-talking, Tin Pan Alley record man who would say, forget about it, with the contracts with the Carole Kings and the Sedakas, and we signed them, we never look at the contract, we signed the contract, they write the hits, I publish the hits, but forget about with the hits, with the number of things, with the locomotion and the cooking train sound. But I was there on Vine Street in some studio when he taped his first intro for Peter Frampton or somebody on Don Kirshner's Rock Concert. And this very fast-talking, promoting New York guy slowed right down and froze up. He was so scared, and it sounded something like this. I'm Don Kirshner, and this is Rock Concert. In 1971, Dean Anthony called me on a kid named Peter Frampton. And it goes on from there. Thank you. It's just one of my hits. Now you've remembered.
Oh, one of my favorites, honestly.
And then I got to introduce the Blues Brothers as Don Kirshner. Today, they are no longer an authentic blues act, but have managed to become a viable commercial product. What was the question?
Oh, I think we started talking about Garrett Morris and
oh yeah,
went into the.
Yeah, I segued back into talking about myself, which I'm much more comfortable doing.
There was one other musical piece that I remember that he did. That was the big prison musical piece. Yeah. Was that something you were part of as well?
Yeah, I was playing the piano in the prison Follies. Everybody collaborated on that. And it was just nothing much more than Gilda casting the Prison Follies wearing a really short skirt, and all the prisoners just singing and then jumping her bones at the end of each of their auditions. Somehow it was the first time that I used the name The Shiv, which then became my Blues Brothers nickname. Because I was in prison, I was Paul the Shiv. Belushi said, my piano player, Paul the Shiv Shaffer. I can't remember Belushi's number. But Garrett's number was one suggested by Lord. I'm going to get me a shotgun and kill all the whiteys I see. Simple as that.
But that was hugely memorable.
But each of them just jumped on Gilda at the end. That was that bit.
Talk a bit more about Gilda as a person. Obviously, you knew her from Godspell, but a couple of minutes on Gilda Radner.
Sweetest, most wonderful friend. Um, very much a supporter of mine all through the years. Um, she gave me a pair of shoes when she was in Godspell. Platforms, because I wasn't exactly the tallest guy in the world. And I don't know, they were hard to wear. They weren't comfortable, but they had stacked, they were stacked like this and heels like this, made out of rubber and stuff. And I wore them every day, till my back couldn't take it anymore. And I remember very clearly that even back in Godspell days, I was into the oldies and 60s and stuff like that, 50s. And she threw me a birthday party once, a 50s-oriented party. And this is before Grease and the whole, thing with greasers and stuff. But a wonderful party where everybody in Godspell came dressed as 50s characters. And she had a poodle skirt, of course. I don't know, she typed my immigration form out for me when I couldn't figure out how am I ever going to get this done? So I got a visa to do Saturday Night Live.
Wow.
And very loved to laugh, would laugh so hard that she couldn't breathe, and that was her favorite thing to be doing.
Jane Curtin.
A lovely girl and a woman who was the only one of any of us, I think, who was married to a great guy. And I think the marriage still lasts today. And so she had a real life as a married lady, and she would not necessarily hang out late into the night with the rest of us. She would go home and have a normal life. But she did log in a good number of hours, and I did the numbers like that, Chevy's Girls with her, and she was a trooper who would do anything. And a professional actress who could get just as serious laughs as anybody else, but, was an actress more than a comedian. Nonetheless, she could sing and did, there was another girl group thing we did once that Danny wrote. We wrote it for a trade show. We did the IRTS show, whatever that stands for, television trade.
Was it HRTS? Was it?
At that time it was called the IRTS.
Oh.
It may have changed.
Okay.
And it took place in a ballroom, and this year the Saturday Night Live group was going to put on the show. But we really took it seriously and wrote numbers and stuff and had an orchestra with strings for the first time. And Daddy wrote this song about Philo T. Farnsworth, the inventor of the cathode ray. And it was called Cathode Ray, and we did it as a Supreme style thing. Gilda singing lead, I think, as Diana Ross and the other two girls, the other Supremes, singing about cathode ray. Again, Danny's crazy. Where does he get these ideas? But they sang their hearts out as the Supremes, and Jane was, right there, right into the style. Just like Gilda, who came from Detroit. Lorraine was more of a rock and roll chick, too.
Let's move on to Lorraine Newman then.
Rock and roll soul. I got along well with her for that reason. Came from Los Angeles, was in the Groundlings, came in with a character. I remember her early character as a stewardess who was in that Godfather group with Elliot Gould and Belushi did his Brando Godfather, and again it was a way, a place, a kind of a modular sketch where anybody who had Belushi always wanted to do Brando and the Godfather. Let's do a sketch where each person in group therapy gets to speak a little bit, and Lorraine spoke as her stewardess character, who just flight attendant, just enjoys helping people and making them comfortable so they can fall asleep sitting up. I remember that about her. And she could sing and did. Um, what other numbers did she do? I know that I did. Oh, they did a. Marilyn wrote them also a Runaways kind of number. Runaways being an early heavy metal girl group, all girls playing guitars and drums, and Joan Jett was in the group.
Oh, wow.
The Runaways. They predated the Go-Go's, and they were heavier than the Go-Go's. And we did a Runaways style kind of thing. That I believe Lorraine was we're Video Vixens. Lorraine was the lead singer on that.